what's going on here is so fascinating. We're about to show you a Ben Shapiro clip in just a little bit. Ben Shapiro, just earlier tonight, went on CNN. Let me say that again. Ben Shapiro went on CNN on Jake Tapper's show in order to denounce not Nick Fuentes, but Tucker Carlson as basically a racist and a bigot. Isn't that amazing? Conservative politics for the last decade was about this main grievance. Oh, liberals, and the minute you disagree with them, instead of engaging your ideas, they call you a racist and a bigot. They go on CNN and they accuse you of having bad character. They want to destroy your reputation. They want to shut down debate. And they weaponize racism and bigotry accusations against their political opponents, and this is what makes them evil. And yet now you have all these pro-Israel fanatics in the Republican Party, Ben Shapiro and Ted Cruz, and all the rest of them, Mark Levin. And that's pretty much all they ever do now. They just run around calling everybody they disagree with on Israel a racist, a bigot, an anti-Semite, a hater. And not just Nick Fuentes, but Tucker Carlson and anybody else who questions the U.S.-Israel relationship. I just want to show you what a warped world we're now living in. Ben Shapiro goes on to the show, the CNN show, of his friend Jake Tapper, who's also a lifelong and vocal supporter of Israel. And Ben Shapiro went on there to call Tucker Carlson a bigot, which is, you know, it's like going back into a time machine in 2020 when liberals would go on CNN every day and call everybody who they disagreed with politically a bigot. I thought that's what we were supposed to be liberating ourselves from. That was like the peak of wokeism. And now it's not Ibram Kendi or Nancy Pelosi who goes on CNN to call conservatives like Tucker Carlson racist and bigots. It's Ben Shapiro who does so. And the reason they're doing it is because they are desperate to ensure that anybody who questions Israel, young conservatives who they know are questioning Israel, who are starting to turn against Israel, they want them to know, the Ben Shapiros of the world, the Ted Cruzes of the world, the AIPACs of the world, the Mark Levins of the world. They want everyone to know that there is still a major price to pay if you question the bipartisan consensus on Israel. That Ben Shapiro will go on CNN and he will call you a racist and a bigot. And if they can succeed in forcing conservative institutions to declare Tucker Carlson beyond the limits of acceptability, obviously they could do that to anybody. And that's why it's become so important. So now you have this spectacle of conservatives like Ben Shapiro who complained about racism and bigotry accusations being weaponized forever, now being the ones perpetrating it in defense of the foreign country they most love and revere. Look at what happened earlier today. This is just about an hour ago on CNN.
The real issue here is I think that Tucker Carlson's morphing from, I would say, a very edgy right-wing political figure on Fox News, but certainly within the mainstream, into a conspiracist, a person who ideologically launders anti-Semitism, who ideologically launders all sorts of anti-Americanism on his show, and then airs it for the public to hear with interviews like the ones he did with Nick Fuentes, which was essentially a massage of Nick Fuentes. You know, I think that took a lot of people by surprise, probably including Kevin.
And that was basically the gist of it. I mean, there's other clips, there's other parts of the clip as well where he says Tucker Carlson traffics in anti-Semitism, traffics in bigotry, all because he sat down with Nick Fuentes. Now, I just want to make a couple points, and then I want to show you Tucker Carlson's own words where he appeared with Megyn Kelly as part of that nationwide event that I did. I did the second stop in San Antonio with Megyn. Tucker just did the last one. I think it was last night. I'm not sure exactly where it is. But she asked me about the Nick Fuentes interview. So I want to make sure that you hear Tucker in his own words because he said some things that I think are really worth hearing. But I just want to make a couple points about this idea that Tucker Carlson sat down with Nick Fuentes and that somehow makes him somebody beyond the bounds of decency. Go and look at who is on CNN on virtually a nightly basis, who they treat not adversarially, but as like honored statesmen. People like John Bolton, who have enormous amounts of blood on his hands for lying the United States into all sorts of wars and trying to cajole and manipulate the United States into countless more that he hasn't been able to get the United States to fight in yet. Or people like James Clapper, who ran the U.S. National Security State for President Obama. all kinds of members of Congress who crave and have caused all sorts of bloodshed. But because these are mainstream policies, it's perfectly acceptable in mainstream politics or mainstream media to sit down with them and have a good, friendly, cooperative relationship with them, not to challenge them, but to treat them like honored statesmen. Caitlin Collins at CNN has John Bolton on practically every week. It's like her friend. And there's endless examples of people like that. And yet somehow Nick Fuentes, who, for whatever you might think of his views, hasn't ever started wars, hasn't ever led the United States into wars, hasn't tried to get the United States to go fight in wars, hasn't bombed anybody, hasn't been responsible for massive amounts of bloodshed. That's somebody that you can't sit down and talk to, but it's fine to sit down and talk to the world's worst warmongers, to sit down and talk to Lindsey Graham or Ben Shapiro. And then the other issue is this idea that, oh, it's okay to sit down with Nick Fuentes as long as you push back on his ideas. Anybody who claims that Tucker sat down with Nick Fuentes and didn't push back on any of his ideas is someone who either didn't watch the interview they're purporting to critique or is just an outright liar. Because a good chunk of that discussion, arguably the majority of it, was devoted to Tucker explaining to Nick Fuentes why there are views and opinions that Nick expresses and defends that Tucker disagrees with vehemently and fundamentally. And then Nick explaining to Tucker why he thinks the critique is invalid. It's true Tucker didn't pound the table with his fist and have his face turn red and spit and scream, "You're a Nazi, you're a racist." He didn't do that. And I think what has happened is that in pro-Israel conservative circles, that's pretty much all they do now. They scream Nazi, racist, bigot. And so if you talk to anyone like Nick Fuentes, you're not screaming racist and Nazi and bigot at them all the time, it's going to seem to that crowd that relies on those tactics that you actually haven't pushed back on them. But the entire discussion was composed of two people who have a lot of things in common, but as I said, a lot of differences, exploring each of those. All right, so Megyn Kelly last night at this event that Tucker Carlson appeared with her at asked her about the Nick Fuentes interview and the fallout from it. The entire discussion is about 20 minutes. I really recommend going on YouTube. You can look at Megyn's channel and find the whole discussion. I'm just going to show you a couple of clips. So here is Tucker explaining, essentially when Megyn asked him about the Nick Fuentes interview, he explains why he did it, why he thought Nick Fuentes was worth speaking to, talked about his major influence and his talent. But he also then said he wanted to talk to Nick Fuentes in part because there were some disagreements he had with his understanding of what Nick Fuentes believed. And he emphasized that he hadn't, Nick Fuentes speaks to a younger generation, and Tucker is not in the age group that is typically the kind of person that listens to Nick Fuentes. And Tucker says, I heard clips of Nick Fuentes, but I wanted to sit down and hear in his own words what he thinks. And he came into the interview with the impression that Nick is a kind of racist, a blatant racist and an anti-Semite and a bigot. And Tucker explains why he wanted to go and talk to Nick Fuentes and explain why he rejects that worldview. But in doing so, he said a lot of things that I think are really worth hearing. And here's one clip in which that's the case.
That idea is not only being challenged in our country, it's being disregarded. It's disregarded in DEI. It's disregarded in affirmative action. Identity politics is a refutation of that idea. We are awarding some people something because of how they were born and hurting others for the same reason. That is anti-Western. It's evil. And it leads, in the end, inexorably to genocide. That is the root idea behind what happened in Europe in the 40s under the Nazis. It's the root idea behind what happened in Rwanda in 1994. It's the root idea, just saying, behind what's happening in Gaza right now, where it's like, we're going to kill the kids too, we don't care, and we're going to, by the way, move everyone out because they're a people that is fundamentally opposed to us. Yeah, well, I'm not for that, sorry, because that's not the Western understanding of justice. We punish the guilty alone, we do not punish the innocent. period. And that's not racism, and in fact, it's the answer to racism. It's the answer to anti-Semitism. It's why anti-Semitism is wrong. It's why racism is wrong. No, you're not better than me. No, you're not worse than me because of how you were born. You're the same as me because we were both created by God. Period. So the whole idea of thinking of people as members of tribes, any tribe, including my tribe, is prima facie immoral. And yet, it is the operating idea behind so much of our politics. And I reject it. I reject it when it manifests as anti-Semitism. I reject it when it manifests as anti-white racism, which has, been pretty common. I know we're not supposed to say it, but it's real. But I'm not mad about that just because my kids are white, which they are. I'm mad about that because the idea is immoral, it's anti-Christian, and that is the destruction of the West. And so when I see these people like, we're defending Western, when Mark Levin's like, we're defending Western civilization, or Randy Fine, who's like, yeah, we just have to kill every Palestinian because they're Palestinian so we can defend Western civilization. I'm like, no. You are the enemy of Western civilization because collective punishment is the enemy of Western civilization. Period.
Wow.
That's what I wanted to say, and I said it, and they called me a Nazi, and I'm like, actually, I hate the Nazis for that specific reason.
But wait.
I mean, there's so much going on there important, but the main point I want to make is this. Aside from the fact that one of the reasons why it's so important for these people to destroy Tucker is because he has always been an extremely effective communicator. It's one of the reasons why he's had a very successful career in television for decades. And he built up a massive platform, bigger than ever, as a result of those 7 years at Fox in the 8 o'clock time slot, which is when he became one of the most influential voices in conservative politics in the country, not just in the country, but the West. And he's now using those skills and that platform to link what Israel is currently doing in Gaza with the Americans' help to things like the Holocaust or the Rwanda genocide, and doing so in an unflinching and unapologetic way. And it's hard to overstate how threatening that is to this bipartisan Beltway swamp for whom support for Israel has been sacrosanct, just not permitted to be questioned, let alone denounced in terms that eloquent and that unapologetic. But besides that, I think the crucial point that actually is being made here involves Nick Fuentes and the reaction to it. And what I said at the top was this obviously fraudulent pretext for why Republican establishment politicians and pundits like Ben Shapiro are so intent on not just throwing Nick Fuentes out of anything relating to conservative politics, but also people like Tucker Carlson and everybody else who questions Israel and the U.S. relationship with it. This idea that, we're doing this not for Israel, but because we're so inherently offended by anything that's racist or bigoted. And Nick Fuentes is a racist and a bigot, and Tucker Carlson is a racist and a bigot. As Ben Shapiro said with his friend Jake Tapper on CNN earlier today, Tucker traffics in anti-Semitism. He traffics in bigotry. And the way Tucker's answering that is by pointing out that actually the people who are demanding that Nick Fuentes not be spoken to, by pretending what they actually hate about Nick isn't that he's opposed to Israel and getting a lot of young conservatives to be opposed to Israel, but instead what they hate about him is he's a racist and a bigot and a Nazi, and that's also what they hate about Tucker. Tucker's saying the entire project of demanding support for Israel is based on exactly those kinds of that worldview. Israel is a country premised upon Jewish supremacy. And as a result, anyone that is the enemy of the Jewish state of Israel is looked at as someone who's not human. That's what Tucker's saying there, that once you start judging people not as individuals, and once you depart from the idea that the only people you're supposed to punish are the guilty, but instead you can punish entire groups of people, who cares if Israel kills a bunch of babies in Gaza? Those are Palestinians. They don't really have any real worth. Jewish life is more valuable. We can just extinguish huge numbers of Palestinians, all of them. We can drive them out, we can kill them all. That was and is the foundation of mainstream Israeli politics when they look at Arabs and Palestinians in particular, and certainly was the driving ethos of the US supported and funded and armed destruction of Gaza. And whether Tucker's consciously doing it or not, the effect of that statement is to say that the Ben Shapiros of the world and the Mark Levins of the world and Ted Cruz and all the rest, they're not offended by racism or bigotry or the idea that you don't judge people by groups. That's not their problem with Nick Fuentes. If Nick Fuentes were an Israel supporter, that's the only thing you change about him, and he held every other view that he holds and expressed it in every way that he expresses it, nobody on the right would have a problem with Nick Fuentes. There are huge numbers of outright bigots and racists who are perfectly welcome and long have been in conservative politics, but they're not a problem because they support Israel. And there are Israel supporters who have said exactly that. Ben Shapiro once said, I know that Ann Coulter is anti-Semitic and hates Jews, but I don't have a problem with her because she's pro-Israel. When John Podhoretz, the fail son of one of the founders of conservative politics, Norman Podhoretz, when Trump was bombing Iran, this is what John Podhoretz said. Quote, Trump bombed Iran. He can say Shylock 100 times a day forever as far as I'm concerned. Meaning Ben Shapiro saying, John Podhoretz is saying, we don't care about bigotry. You can be as anti-Semitic as you want. You can be as racist as you want. As long as you support and serve Israel, then we're happy with you. That's the fraud of all of this. So many of the whole pro-Israel project, the idea of we're going to fund Israel and support Israel and arm them and never impede them or use our leverage when they eradicate Palestinian life in a way that not just human rights organizations, but even Israeli scholars of genocide have said is a classic genocide. The mindset that says that that's okay, or even something that ought to be cheered, is exactly the kind of racist, bigoted mindset based on group supremacy that these people who are pro-Israel in the Republican Party are pretending to find so offensive. They can't admit what they're really up to, which is to destroy Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes or Candace Owens, whoever, because they're opposed to Israel. That's their real reason. They can't admit that, though, because there's too much anti-Israel sentiment, even in their own movement. They still have to pretend that they're not that tied to a foreign country. So they have to pretend that, oh no, we're like the left in after George Floyd. We're just so single-mindedly devoted to an anti-racist agenda that the minute we sniff out racism or bigotry anywhere, we have to kick those people out of our movement. We can't tolerate that. Most people drink coffee only to wake up. But what if your coffee could actually fight aging from the inside out? Rejuvenate coffee isn't just caffeine in a cup. It's a premium Arabica coffee infused with CAAKG, a compound naturally found in your body that plays a key role in energy production, cellular repair, and longevity. Scientists have studied it for its ability to keep your cells powered and support healthier aging. That means you're not just getting clean, crash-free energy, you're giving your body the fuel it needs at the deepest level. More focus, better mornings, long-term benefits without changing a single habit, other than the coffee you already drink every day. So if you're going to start your day with coffee, make it be one that's weaponized against aging. Go to 1775coffee.com/code and order Rejuvenate coffee today. Fuel your body, project your future, Rejuvenate. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.